he was a very well-known pimp in Fayetteville. And there was a particular night, I remember the first night I was sold. So I went in and I did what he asked me to do. And there was that shame and filthiness over again, just like it was when I was a kid.
What was your age the first time?
17.
17.
Mm-hmm. And I saw all those nice things that they had. And I was like, I want that. But I didn't know what it was going to cost me.
Again, would you say that he owned you and your sister during that time?
I would say that. I remember my father-in-law looking at my youngest sister and said, you know what, Emily, you just need to come to the terms that both your sisters are always going to be ladies of the night.
I'm again making the assumption that you couldn't have possibly kept this a secret from your kids.
Oh, absolutely not. January 23rd of 2015, I woke up that morning and just felt something different. Something was about to happen.
Have you ever seen a termite? It's a tiny little creature about the size of an ant. Alone, this creature is not a serious threat. However, put a few thousand of these insidious creatures behind a wall, and they will eat that wall from the inside out. The problem is, they like to hide behind the walls and structures of a building, and by the time they are discovered, the damage is catastrophic. And guess what? They never work alone. The typical termite colony is around 60,000. Now, let's talk about prostitution and sex trafficking. You may or may not have ever seen a prostitute or a person being trafficked, but it's happening right now behind the walls and fabric of our communities. Whether you know about this cancer or not, one thing should be perfectly clear. Humans are not for sale. So how does a person get pulled into this colony of destruction? And more importantly, how does a person get out? Today, our guest is going to answer a lot of questions about this uncomfortable topic as she shares her life-change story with us. It's an amazing story, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, my name is Kachia Phillips, and I am the program coach for Hub of Hope, and I'm also a grateful survivor of human trafficking right here in Northwest Arkansas.
Well, thank you for joining my podcast. Now, people that are listening are already saying, well, what in the world is Hub of Hope? So give us your short little definition of what Hub of Hope is, and then towards the end, we'll get into kind of what your role is there and kind of how you got involved in it. But
Absolutely.
Tell us what that ministry is about.
Sure. We are a nonprofit locally here in Northwest Arkansas, and we work with adult women survivors of human trafficking.
So, I grew up here in Northwest Arkansas, and I tend to think, this is like paradise. There's no really bad things that happen here, but being a part of your fundraiser, and my wife is involved in ministry, I know that behind the scenes, many times, there are a lot of bad things that are going on.
Absolutely.
Let's start with your story, and let's start with a little bit of your background. Why don't you tell the listeners where you're from, where you grew up, and tell us a little bit about your family of origin.
Sure. I'm from Fayetteville, Arkansas. My family and I kind of grew up out in Goshen, though. I grew up out on a farm out there with my grandparents and my parents. My parents divorced when I was like 14 years old. And my mom became a single parent then. So she was an RN for the VA hospital for 40 years. My dad was a printer, and he worked out of Springdale, Arkansas. And when they divorced, I ended up with my mother, my sister, and I. And we had a lot of time on our hands as children because she was working 2 jobs to support us. And my brother had gone on into the Navy by that time. So we had a lot of time on our hands, but my parents were both Christians. I grew up in a Christian home. We went to church every Sunday. But I just always was that child that felt like I didn't belong in certain groups at school. I felt less than. Maybe a little of low self-esteem going on in my life. So that was a big turning point in my life.
So I have a question. Yes. So you said a lot there in that first little sentence there. So I know your parents divorced at 14, but that's the start of adolescence for you. So you mentioned a sister. Is that your only sibling, or do you have more than one?
Yeah, I do have another half sister that came along when I was 16, but my younger sister that was 2 years younger than me, her and I, we were very close, and we gravitated to other children like us that were in single parent homes, divorced families. And that's where we kind of found our comfort zone.
You mentioned religion. So your parents are Christians. Did you attend church every Sunday? Was there prayer before dinner? I mean, how was that religion?
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, it goes back to my great grandmother, who I was very close to. I was born on her 80th birthday. And one thing that we did every night was pray before we go to bed, and she would always pray Psalms 23 over us before we went to sleep. I was very, very close to her as her first great granddaughter. And she was kind of the backbone of the family. She instilled so much in me that I feel like her prayers and her actions in my life is a big part of what brought me back.
So my wife hates it when I use the word religion, and I say, was there any religion? I kind of do it on purpose because I think there's a difference between religion and then having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Absolutely. So sometimes children in their home, there's religion, and then later they find out, oh, I could have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Do you feel like that you had a relationship with Jesus in your childhood, or was it more of a, something that you just did on Sundays, or that it was a institution, but not really a personal relationship? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that at church, it was a lot of religion. I think I found my relationship as a child when I did have a relationship with the Lord. That was through my great grandmother. That was in the home that I was finding relationship. But once she passed, and my parents had divorced, and I was still going to church with her, but it just seemed a lot of religion. Like I wasn't getting fed. There wasn't that. We weren't being taught about Holy Spirit and things like that. So that was really kind of a negative aspect in that. And I look back now, and the church that I go to now is a wonderful church, Spirit filled. But once I got saved and delivered, when I went back to my old church, it was really very asleep, very dead. It was a nice message and things like that, but I just didn't feel the Spirit there.
So as a child, then there wasn't really a decision to follow Christ personally. Maybe did you get baptized or something? But
I got baptized several times before then, but it just didn't stick.
Okay. Is it more of a formality, or because someone else was doing it?
Oh, you have to do this to do this, or you to do this to be saved. And I'm like, okay, but there was no spiritual awakening.
Okay. So what was Kachia like in early school years, elementary going into middle school? Were you an outward person? Were you?
I was very much an introvert.
Okay.
And I was very quiet, shy. I was born with a lazy eye and had several surgeries. And so that already was, a part of my low self-esteem, where I didn't feel like I didn't belong, and I was different. I wish, that somebody would have told me as a child that I was the reason why maybe I felt out of place is because I was set apart by God. I wished that was instilled in me as a young child, because that probably would have been a turning point for me.
So did you feel like you were broken, like there was something that was wrong with you, or
Oh,
not?
Absolutely. I had, unfortunately, as a young kid, you pray for things. And when my parents were when they first separated, I was like, man, I wish, I could go live with my dad, and my parents divorced so I can go to school with my friends in Springdale. And then it happened, the part, them getting a divorce. And I thought, oh, did I do that? This is my fault. I shouldn't have asked for that. And that was kind of the beginning of like, ooh, I got to be really careful of what I asked for, and carry some of that guilt too. So
Wow. So you took on some of that when they split up, that possibly you had something to do with that?
yes, absolutely. I truly believe that.
That's a lot for a 14-year-old.
It was.
What was if you'd say prior to the divorce, so in your younger years, what was the most difficult thing that you struggled with?
We had a group of family friends, and their son, he wasn't much older or younger. He was about my age, had molested me. And I was probably 4 or 5 at the time, and it continued till I was about 9 years old. And of course, my parents didn't know how to deal with it. The advice they had gotten from counselors and other people were just, oh, she's not going to remember this, just leave it alone and let it go. And so they did. And so I carried that already, at a very young age, a lot of shame. And was having feelings, even physical feelings, that I shouldn't have been having at that young of an age. And I think that was kind of the start of the shame, not belonging, low self-esteem, I'm not good enough. And then, of course, when my parents divorced, it was my fault. So I had already was carrying all of those things by the time I was 13, 14 years old.
So you did remember it?
Oh, I did.
It wasn't, you didn't forget it. You did remember it.
Yeah.
And they didn't talk about it with you.
No. And I'm not saying that, and I don't blame them at all. I mean, I'm not blaming my parents for anything. They just didn't know how to deal with it. And which, a lot of that stuff wasn't normalized back then. It wasn't normalized to talk about things like that or work through them. Like, it's becoming more normalized now, but it just wasn't back then.
Did you talk to your sister because you guys were close about it? Did you talk to her about it at all?
No, I didn't. I never talked to her about it. I don't believe anybody even knew it was. And I don't even know if it was possibly happening to her. I mean, we've never had that conversation. So
wow.
Yeah.
So let's now, after the divorce, or you're 14, and that would put you in junior high. Is that
Yes,
right? Yeah.
yes.
So junior high age and stuff. So after that happened, and you didn't get to go with your dad, and your dad was struggling and stuff. So what did anything change in your life, good or bad, during that time period?
I became quite rebellious. My sister and I started skipping school. I had a boyfriend that was in high school by then. And even started running away from home. I'm not for very long, but like staying out all night, doing things with people that were a lot older than me. And so that was kind of the beginning of the rebellion. And my mom was working 2 jobs, so she really couldn't keep an eye on us. She did send my sister to a foster home for a little while, for a couple of years, just because she was a little bit younger than me, and she couldn't be there to watch her. So, and then by that time I was 16. I had dropped out of school. My mom got pregnant and had a baby when I was 16. So I dropped out of day school to go to night school. Took night classes while I could help with my youngest sister.
So you were taking care of your youngest sister during the day, and then at night you were going to school?
Yes, trying to finish up high school at night.
It's a lot for a 16, 17-year-old.
Yeah, it was. But I did it, finished school. I ended up actually going to get my high school diploma through night school. And that, but I had, started, I had broke up with the first boyfriend and started kind of gravitating to another group of friends, which led me into using drugs, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes.
So how about your younger sister, not the youngest, but the one that you were close to?
She came back from the foster home. I spent 2 years begging my mom to bring her home. And finally, my mom did let her come home. She was I would, by the time she got back, I was already, hanging out at these clubs and running with these older people, and she kind of gravitated with me, you know. Um, and then she met a boy that eventually started physically abusing her. The boyfriend I had acquired at that time had been physically abusing me too. So,
So why do you think that you and your sister put up with that? Was it because of your low self-esteem and that you didn't think you could do any better?
Well,
or?
I think it was a lot of the group that we were hanging out with. I mean, all the girls that we knew, their boyfriends were doing the same thing. It was just a thing, some worse than others. But yeah, we were just getting beat up and making up, and everything was better, and then we just keep going, through this vicious cycle. My sister was 2 years younger than me, and she met a man that was 20 years older than her.
20 years older?
Yes.
Wow.
And he introduced us to some harder drugs, crack cocaine, speed, so other things like that. And, he spent, I guess she was about 15 or 16. He spent, all these years until she was 18 grooming her. Getting her addicted to drugs, spending money on her, taking her on trips, all this was going on. And then when she turned 18, he married her. And I remember the day that they got married and she came to the house, to my mom's. And she pulled me to the side and she said, "Sis, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go." And I said, "Well, then don't. What's the big deal? Just don't go. Like, your family's right here. You can tell him, no, you change your mind, and he can go on his way."
Now they're already married.
Yeah, they just got married that day.
And then that day, and then she said, "I don't want to do it."
And then she just pulled me to the side. She's like, "I'm scared. I don't really want to do this." And I said, "Well, then don't. Like, we can fix this. It's not. But she was like, "Well, I just don't want to disappoint him." And that day they left for South Padre for their honeymoon. And when they came back, he had packed their stuff and they were moving to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I begged her not to go, and she went. So
why Minneapolis? Is that where he was from, or?
No, he was actually from Fayetteville, but he had a cousin that lived in Minneapolis that him and his wife were running escort services up there.
And you knew about this? Your sister knew about this or not?
I don't know if she knew about it or not, but they moved up there and started their own escort services up there in Minneapolis. And he worked her day and night up there.
So she wasn't owner or part owner, like being married like owner. She didn't run it. She was owned. She was owned.
Yeah.
And so this was all part of his plan.
Absolutely. He was a very well-known pimp in Fayetteville. And he had been doing it, back in the, 70s even, this guy was older, quite a bit older than her,
Now, did you know any of that
I did not. No,
okay.
I didn't really know a whole lot about him, even though we grew up, in the same town, until we were pulled into that group of people, a culture that we didn't really, that was like, we didn't really even know about it until we, started gravitating through kids in school, to this crowd of people.
Now, did he, again, I'm not familiar with this world. So yeah. Did she participate in any of that? And basically prostitution. Did she participate in that before they went to Minneapolis? And
I don't think so. I don't remember any of that happening to her. Now, it did happen to me, but not through him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had a friend, I had older friends. And so I had a female friend who was like, taking me to these fraternity parties and things up on the university when I was 17. And there was a particular night, I remember the first night I was sold. She was like, "Hey, we don't have any money to go out tonight, but there's this man that I know, and we go over here, and you just, see him. He'll give us a lot of money.
If
And
you do the things he wants you to do.
exactly, yeah. And so I went over there, and I was like, man, I just don't want to do this. I know this is wrong. I don't want to do this. But like my sister, I was like, man, I don't want to disappoint. I felt pressured, so I went in and I did what he asked me to do, and there was that shame and filthiness over again, just like it was when I was a kid. And I did it, and we went on and we went to the parties and did whatever. But I just remember like those feelings coming back, over and over again, and I just felt so dirty.
What was your age? Right, the first time?
17.
17.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. But did you go back into doing that again, or did you stop after that?
No, I did. I did go back a couple of times.
Okay.
And then it stopped, I did. And then for a while I didn't. Once I started dating another boy, I didn't do that again, and I didn't tell him about anything. I was really ashamed of it.
Did you talk about this with anybody, your sister? Did you guys talk about what happened or any of that stuff?
Not until I got up there with her. She called me about a year later, after she had been up there, and she's like, she called me. She's like, I need you to come up here. He's abusing me. I'm having to work all the time. And they had his 2 daughters up there. They were, she was having to help raise them too. They were 4 and 6 years old, I think. So I went up there because she asked me to come up there. I left my kids with my mom.
With the intent of saving her or helping her?
With the intent of helping her and saving her and getting her back home. And, I got up there and I saw the condo on the lake, the nice car, her getting to go shop every day, getting her nails done, her hair done. And what does the world teach us? Our value comes by the material things we have and the money we make. And I saw all those nice things that they had, and I was like, I want that. But I didn't know what it was going to cost me. And so I began using drugs with them up there. And at first I was just kind of, sitting at home watching the kids while they stayed out all night. And then about a year later, we moved back to Fayetteville and opened escort services here. And I just was, I want these things too.
How long did you stay in Minneapolis?
I stayed about a year with them.
So a year, yeah. And then did you come back with them?
Yes, okay. I came back with them.
So would you say that he owned you and your sister during that time?
I would say that. Yeah, they were getting all the agency fees. Or he was getting all the agency fees. And, of course, then you owe for rent, you owe for your food, you owe for your drugs. So you're really not seeing any of the money. So it's just really literally, they want you to, traffickers want you to believe that you're really making all this money when they're taking all the money.
It's basically whatever they give you, right?
It's all you're getting. Yeah. So it was just like a vicious cycle. And, even after we moved back down to Fayetteville, I worked for them for a couple of years. And then, my best friend, female, she opened an escort service. She's like, and you can come over here and work with me and we can do this together. And you don't have to give them all your money. And I thought, well, that's a great thing. I've been working all this time and not really seeing any money. I would love that. And so I went to work for her, and she worked with me for about a year, and then she stopped working. And then I kept working. And then it was, well, you owe me for rent. You owe me for food. You owe me for the drugs I'm getting from us. And, so I wasn't really keeping any of that money either.
So did she have a manager or someone? Because you said she said that you could come over here. So she didn't own the business.
No, she owned the business.
So did you take over the business then?
I worked for her full time.
But you said she quit.
She quit working.
Yeah, but she still owned the business.
She kept owning the business, and she still kept taking all the money.
Sending you guys out and taking the money.
Out,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was just the same thing over again, cycle over again. But I just never, once I did get out and look back, I was like, before I met the director of Hub of Hope, before I did a training in human trafficking, all this time it was like, well, I chose to do those things. They were my fault. I chose to be in that life. And I never looked at it as that I was being groomed. I mean, I didn't know what grooming was. I didn't know what force, fraud, or coercion was. I didn't believing the lies, or if you don't do this, you can't have this. I didn't know about those things. I just thought, well, this is what I chose to do.
So let me ask you, and again, because I'm very ignorant when it comes to this this topic, but so how much, in 50%, 80%, how much are the drugs a part of what you do? In other words, they're giving you drugs. Do you get addicted to the drugs?
Oh, absolutely.
And so part of the draw is that I can't quit this because I need this drug. I need these things.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like, I can't quit doing this because I can't get any drugs. And if I can't get drugs, I can't do this. Right? Because for me, I grew up in a Christian home. I knew what I was doing was morally wrong. Like, even as a child, I mean, I was very sheltered as a child. I had not ever heard of any of these drugs, alcohol. I mean, I knew what alcohol was because my dad started drinking again, but drugs, I didn't know what drugs were. And I didn't know that there was human trafficking or prostitution that was going out in the world as a young girl. I didn't know any of those things. So I was very, very sheltered by my parents and my grandparents. So when this all happened, I was like, it just opened a whole different world for me. It was like night and day. And the drugs I had to do to cover up the shame, right? Like, I knew what I was doing wrong, but I knew I had to keep doing it. So I had to use the drugs. So the drugs made me not feel.
And did you do drugs before you would go out on
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The drugs that, eventually moved from crack cocaine to meth. So the meth would keep me up for hours and hours and weeks at a time so I can just continue to work and not feel anything. And, then, after about a week, come down, sleep for about 24 hours and then get back up and go back to work again. And this went on for 22 years.
Wow. So how old were you when you and your sister moved to Fayetteville back in? How old were you then? 20 something?
I was about 20, 22, 23.
And you stayed
23.
And you stayed doing that same thing.
Yeah.
For how long again?
22 years.
22 years.
I mean, from the very first time that I did it at 17 till I was 40 years old.
Wow. So, I recently had someone on my podcast, and I thought this was an interesting statement. He said that addiction and sin will pick you up in a limousine, but it will drop you off in a dump truck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, that goes back to just how the enemy is so cunning. Lucifer was angel of light. So, he's going to bring those things that make it look so good. And, we heard all these stories from other girls that were doing it like, this is a life, what I'm saying? You're going to make all this money, you get all these nice things, but you don't ever get, they never tell you up front, like, these are the things that you're going to have to do. And these are the things that could happen while you're doing it. It wasn't just these nice guys you were going to go see, There were a lot of times that there were rapes involved and robberies involved, that we endured. So, and physical abuse, mental, emotional, verbal abuse that we were going to go through. They don't advertise those things up front. So.
Wow. So did you ever have, 22 years, that's a long time.
Yeah.
So did you ever have moments of clarity where you said, I got to get out of this? Is there a way out?
I actually was at my ex-husband's parents' house one day with my youngest sister, and we were just out there visiting. And I remember my father-in-law saying, looking at my youngest sister and said, you know what, Emily, you just need to come to the terms that both your sisters are always going to be ladies of the night. And I sat there and I was like, wow, I just couldn't believe that came out of, but it was like, I know the enemy uses, the people closest to us to, discourage us. And when he said that, something just was like, wow, is this all that I'm ever going to be? Like, is this it for me? Like, am I going to constantly continue this cycle for the rest of my life? Am I going to die a old prostitute that has left her kids for her mom to raise and never have anything? And so I pondered on that for quite a while. And it was probably a couple of years later, it was about 2 years later when I finally got out, and decided, this is not all I want to be.
So how old were your kids when you finally decided to get out?
I was 40. They were already grown. So my daughter had already graduated. She was probably 20 and my son was 22.
So I'm again making the assumption that you couldn't have possibly kept this a secret from your kids.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
So
the whole
knew.
Entire town knew what I was. Everybody that I knew what I was doing. Knew what my sister and I were doing. Everybody knew. My kids knew. To a certain extent, my mom did her best to try to protect my kids from my life, but she still let me come around once in a while. To visit with them. She would allow me to come on my birthdays, but of course she would make me a cake and I wouldn't show up because, the shame just kept me away. And I would just come by and drop them off some money, give them hugs and take off again. So, I missed out on a lot. I missed out on their childhood and, it was a long time before we built our relationship back.
So your mom basically raised your kids.
She did.
So was there any faith at all? I mean, did you just block that part of your life out? Did you say, hey, there is a God? Did you ever pray to God? I mean, tell me a little bit. I know
I had been in some really abusive, situations where I was getting beat so badly that I bargained with God. Like, if I live through this, I promise I'm going to change, and of course I didn't. But, right before I got delivered, probably that week before, I was like, is this it for me? Is this all that I'm going to be? So I started thinking about that. And the last week of that I was out there, I was like, man, this is just not what I want anymore. I'm tired. I'm getting tired. I'm missing out on everything. I'm just really tired. And January 23rd of 2015, I woke up that morning and just felt something different. Something was about to happen. And I ended up going to this little Hispanic store down the street by the smoke shop in Fayetteville. And I went in there to play on these little games that they had in there. And then when I came out, my friend and I came out, we got in the car and we got pulled over. And they pulled us over and they, took my license and were trying to find out who I was. And they told me that they had a warrant for my arrest for selling drugs, delivery charges. And what had happened, though, was as I was leaving that store, the two detectives that had been looking for me were next door at Rick's Iron Skillet eating breakfast, and they saw me walk out that store. So they had called the patrol to pull me over. It was just so ironic, but I knew before I left the house that day that something was going to happen, and it did. And so they put me in the back seat of the car. My friend was crying, and I looked at her and I said, "It's okay. I'm tired. It's okay. I'm good." And they let her go, and I was sitting in the back of the car, and detectives came and they were like, "We can make this go away if you just do X, Y, and Z." And I said, "Nah, I'm tired. Take me on to jail."
They wanted you to rat on someone
Yeah, they wanted
above,
to be
right?
a confidential informant for him, and I was like, "Yeah, nah, I'm good." So I went to jail that day at Washington County Jail, and I slept for about the first couple of days, and then one day the chaplain came in. Her name was Judy Bratton. She was a Washington County chaplain, and she gave me a Bible, and she said, "I want you to read the red letters in this Bible. They're for you." And I was like, "Well, okay, I'll do that." And so, that evening I read, and I opened up to John 8, and I'm reading, and two verses just jumped out at me. And one said, "You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And he who the Son sets free is free indeed." And I just sat there and pondered on it, and my heart just broke. My heart just broke. And I just, in the night, it was dark, nobody was up, and I just raised my hands on that top bunk. I lifted my arms up and I said, "Dad, if you are the God who you say you are, then I'm going to sit here till you come get me. And I need you to come clean up my mess." And that's all I said. And I just started crying. And a couple of days later, my friend Mary, she had been like coming over to my brother-in-law's house. Like she would come by there on Sundays and try to get me to come to church with her. I did go one time, but the shame was so heavy on me when I went. I couldn't bring myself to go back. But she had found out that I was in jail, so she came to see me. And she said, "God sent me to come get you. How do I get you out of here?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I gave her a random number of a bondsman off the wall. And like 20 minutes later, they're like, "Phillips, get your stuff. You're out of here." And I'm like, "Okay, I did no paperwork. I've given nobody no money. And I'm leaving? Like, this is wild." And so as I was, the bondsman had just called up there and told him to let me out with no paperwork, no nothing, without meeting with me first, which is very unusual. I don't think any bondsman has ever probably done that. At least not in my lifetime. They had never done that for me. And so we get out and we do, and I go, I had money. So I went and got my money, and I went to the bondsman's office, and, we had a really great conversation. He was an amazing man, a really great conversation with him. And I don't know, the Lord placed it on his heart to do that for me. So we took care of all of that. And then Mary and I were headed back to her house, and I tried to pick up a cigarette and light it, and I threw up. I just puked. I couldn't even do it. So I threw those out. And then she was like, "Well, we're having a women's deliverance retreat this weekend. We leave tonight. We want to pay for you to go." And I was like, "Okay." But I really knew that, God was like, I knew that I needed God to show me that everything was him. And that he does have a sense of humor, because she goes to an all Hispanic Pentecostal church, and I don't know Spanish. So that was just really crazy. But I agreed to go, and these ladies, they took me up there. The pastor and his wife had me writing down, all the things that I had been struggling with: the prostitution, the low self-esteem, the drug addiction, the abuse, all this domestic violence that I had endured. And I just started, he told me to start calling him out. And so I started calling him out. He's like, "Louder, louder, louder, call them out, call them out, call these things out." And I started. And then all this like pressure started building up in my chest and coming up out of my throat. and I started coughing up blood and bile and all these things. And I was on the floor with a bag in front of my face. And these ladies were just casting out all the demons that have attached itself to me over and over with just such authority in Spanish. And I didn't know what they were saying, but I felt all these things coming out of me. And so after they did this, I just laid there for, I don't know how long I was laying there on my face. But when I sat up, my voice was gone. Like I couldn't speak. But I looked out the window, and we were up at Skyview Cabins out in Winslow, and it's just the most beautiful place at Artist Point out there in the mountains, Ozark Mountains. But I looked out the window. There was a big bay window, and I looked out there, and I saw a bald eagle just fly across the window. And it wasn't in the spirit or anything. I mean, it was just physically a bald eagle. And I just heard the Lord tell me, he's like, it is finished. We're done. And I stood up. I rested that night, and then the next morning, the whole church just loved on us. We took the bus back to church, and there were all these people waiting with bouquets of flowers and chocolates, and I remember that bus ride on the way back to the church, and there was a 15-year-old girl that had been up there praying on me, and she's sitting next to me. And I just wept in her arms. It was the craziest thing. Like, this child is you know what I'm saying? Consoling my
adult.
grown
Yeah.
self. And she just was singing over me. It was the most precious thing. And I remember that so vividly. But when we went back, and, that was over 10 years ago, and I haven't picked up anything since. He just took it all away all at once, all of those things. And I just never looked back.
What a miracle. That's incredible. So I have a couple questions. One is, does all of that life that you led, does that totally skew your view of men? Do you mistrust men?
I just had this conversation with one of the girls I work with yesterday, and we were having a conversation about that. And, in the beginning, early on in my healing, I had an idea of, men were just men. And most of them were all alike. But over the years I think that's why God allowed me to stay single for so long. I'm still after 10 years. But, for the first 7 years, he had to teach me that what he was is what a man should reflect. And so he taught me how to be he was the provider. He was my protector. He was my friend. Like, okay, there are good men out here. I don't have to settle for less than. My standards are not too high because they're God's standards.
Amen.
And if I'm single for the rest of my life, but I'm whole and I'm healed, and God is my provider. He's the one who completes me, not another person. And so once I got that understanding, it really changed my perspective in men now. I respect them. I didn't before. I thought they were just somebody who were going to spend money on me for years, But no, I have an honor and respect for good men, godly men, and then I just avoid the rest.
Yeah. How was it coming off of the drugs? I mean, you said that when you got arrested and you slept for 2 or 3 days, whatever. But I mean, not heroin, the meth that you were doing. I mean, that's a highly addictive. And I hear that trying to break that is almost impossible. So how did you do that? I mean,
with God, all things are possible. I mean, he took that deliverance retreat. He took the taste of drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, that life out of my mouth all in one day.
Wow.
I walked away not having any cravings, no desires, nothing. But I know that it doesn't happen like that for everybody. But I do know that I surrendered every part of my life. Every single part of my life was surrendered. I divorced the husband that I was with. I walked away from my marriage. I walked away from the drugs. I stopped. Those people were not coming around. I mean, I didn't even have to tell them not to come around me anymore. They just stopped coming around. Like God removed all those people from my life. I did, however, after all of this, I did have to go to prison, in Fayetteville for 9 months, and then do drug court after that. But it was a breeze. That 9 months in prison was my one-on-one time with God, downloading things in me. A ministry was coming in every single night, and I sat down there every single night with those Bible studies and those church worship sessions. I did everything. I got my serve safe. I got my culinary arts while I was in there. I just took in everything I could learn. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn everything about God. I wanted to learn everything about cooking because now I had this interest in it, and I don't know where it came from because I never had an interest to cook. So I got all those skills in there, and I sat with the Lord for 9 months. It was my one-on-one time with Him, and it was precious. And then once I stepped out of there, I did drug court. So, and it was just easy because I didn't have a desire to do any of those things.
So I have a question and another question. So when would you say that, and again, different people believe different things, but when would you say that Christ was in your heart or in your life? Was there a specific time? Was it a process? I mean, you said that, when you were young, that you really felt like it was more of a formality or whatever. So was that your coming to Jesus moment, going to that women's retreat? Do you feel like that you accepted Christ into your life then, or
I did think that at first, but then I go back to that very moment that I was laying on that bed in jail. I mean, my heart's cry at that moment was, please, I will give you everything. And if you do this for me, I will give my whole entire life to you. And I believe that was the moment. I believe the whole deliverance, those were all steps in the process, but that encounter with God, my heart's cry is like calling out to my dad, like, Daddy, I need you to clean up my mess. I don't want to do this anymore. And he knew that I was done. And I surrendered every part of my life that moment. And I think that was the breaking moment for me. Like when my friend Mary came and said, he sent me to come get you. I knew that my prayer had been answered. That was my heart's cry. That was my answer prayer. That was the turning moment for me. Like, okay, I believe.
Wow. I love that. It reminds me, and I was just thinking of Revelation chapter 3, when Jesus said, I stand at the door and I knock.
Yes.
And if anyone will open the door, I will come in and I will eat with them and they with me.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that, Jesus was knocking on your door for a long time.
Yes.
But that you finally opened up that door and allowed him in to not just the living room, but the bedrooms and the kitchen and the sunroom
every
and
part
every
of it. Yes.
room.
We have, a lot of, sometimes we'll like, oh, well, I'll give you this part, but I'm just going to, hold on right here to this part. And it wasn't like that. It was like, you can have all of it. You can have every bit of it. I don't care. Do what you want with it. Because there's nothing I can do with any of this, but I know you can.
So have you reconnected with your kids, or did you reconnect?
Absolutely.
So tell me about that.
Yeah.
So how did that, you're in jail, you put 9 months in prison, and at that point, you said that they were young adults, right?
Yeah. And actually, when I was in prison this last time for the 9 months, my mom, my youngest sister, and my daughter came to see me every weekend.
Oh,
And so that was the beginning of our building back our relationship. And, I know there was moments after I got out that they were kind of iffy, to see if I was going to continue. But my kids got to see me walk it out. And it was no, I promise I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. It was just being silent and walking the walk. And that's what brought my kids and I back together again. And we are the best of friends now. We spend a lot of time together. I have 5 granddaughters with my son. My daughter, fortunately, she doesn't have any children or a boyfriend yet, but she'll get there one day. But she's beautiful. She delights in the Lord effortlessly. And she's just really genuinely a good girl.
I want to ask you about Hub of Hope. If someone can relate to your story and maybe they're in the depths of being trafficked, or maybe they're in the depths of living in addiction, or maybe they're just in the depths of, away from God. And so, let me ask you, what would you recommend to them? And then tell me a little bit about your Hub of Hope ministry and how someone even here locally could maybe reach out.
Absolutely. I would say that, I know if you are local, reach out to us at Hub of Hope NWA. You can find us online. I think that it needs to be normalized, whether you're feeling that way or whether you're trapped in trafficking and an abusive relationship, whatever it is, it needs to be normalized that we ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Please don't let shame keep you from asking for help. There are people out here who have been through what you've been through, whether it is trafficking, domestic violence, physical, emotional, verbal abuse, depression, anxiety, all of those things. There is a reason why that we were built for relationship. I think God has built us each and created us each for relationship with each other and with Him. So I think it is very important to just reach out for help. If you do reach out to us and you're not in our area, we have resources all over the country that we can refer you to. So that's what I would say.
Amen. And give the Hub of Hope website again, or
sure, it's hubofhope.org. You can find us also Hub of Hope NWA on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I just say reach out, follow us. We got a lot of neat stuff going on. We've got another fundraiser called Give a Mile or More for Hope on October 4th, I believe. It'll be a great time. So
Kachia, if someone's in another state and they are being sex trafficked, or they know someone being sex trafficked, is there a phone number or a website or something that they can go to reach out for help?
Yes, there is. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is 888-373-7888, or you can text info to 233-733.
Thank you for giving us that. So if I always call this the elevator speech here. So if you've got 60 seconds and you could give one message, you've got a very in-depth story, but if someone's listening and you want to get one message to them, what would that message be?
Jesus saves. Call on the name of the Lord and you will be saved. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And all you have to do is believe on Him. That's it. It's just one little step. So that's what I would say.
Kachia, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you know someone who is being sex trafficked and they want to get out of this lifestyle, maybe this person is you. No matter what, reach out for help, because help is available and freedom is possible. Jesus saves. And maybe God has you listening today for a reason. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes, because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review, because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.